Support for WUWM podcasts comes from University School of Milwaukee, fulfilling a values-based mission of developing learners, fostering leaders, and preparing citizens for pre-kindergarten through 12th grade. More information at usm.org/mission.
From Apointe Productions and WUWM, this is Classic Eats. My guest in this episode is Jim Meehan, bartender, author, and co-founder of PDT in New York, one of the most influential bars of the modern craft cocktail revival. He learned from the best and built something entirely his own. It's the rebirth of the serious cocktail, half-size hot dog sandwiches, a phone booth on St. Mark's Place, on this episode of Classic Eats. But first, a story. Here's what nobody tells you about the golden age of the American cocktail. It ended not with a whimper, but with a federal law, and it took 70 years to claw back what was lost. Before Prohibition, the American bartender was a craftsperson of global standing. Jerry Thomas, the professor, published the first cocktail guide in 1862 and tended bar with the showmanship of a performer and the precision of a chemist. What Prohibition destroyed was not the desire to drink. It was the institution of drinking well. And when repeal came in 1933, the craft did not simply resume. The bartenders who knew the old ways were gone and retired. The recipes sat in books nobody was reading for 50 years, and no one asked for better. Then quietly, a bartender named Dale DeGroff started pulling those books off shelves at the Rainbow Room in Rockefeller Center and asking why things had to be this way. He was not starting a movement. He was just refusing to make bad drinks. One of the people paying attention was Audrey Saunders. She absorbed DeGroff's thinking and extended it, brought a chef's discipline to the bar, treated ingredients with the seriousness of the kitchen, and in 2005 opened Pagoo Club on West Houston Street. Named for a legendary British officers' club in colonial Rangoon, it was not just a great bar, it was a proof of concept. Fresh citrus, house-made syrups, spirits chosen with the rigor of a chef. It demonstrated that New York was ready to drink seriously again. Jim Meehan was in that room, watching and building towards something of his own. 2 years later, you're standing in a phone booth. Not waiting for a call, not lost. You are standing in a decommissioned wooden phone booth in the back of a hot dog shop on St. Mark's Place in the East Village, and you are about to have one of the best drinks of your life. The door swings open into PDT, Please Don't Tell, a bar with no sign, no listing, and no interest in explaining itself to anyone who hasn't already found it. The room holds maybe 35 people. He hands you something cold, precise, and alive in a way that drinks of the previous 30 years simply were not. What Meehan had done was to take Saunders' rigor and make it intimate, take the history of the cocktail and make it feel urgent. He would go on to write the PDT cocktail book, which became a foundational text of the revival. But the real argument was made right here in this room, one drink at a time. The craft cocktail movement was not a trend, it was a correction. A culture remembering what it had known how to do, and this time refusing to forget. The phone booth is still there. Order the Benton's Old Fashioned, bacon fat washed bourbon, maple syrup, Angostura, and you will understand exactly what was at stake. Welcome to Classic Eats. I'm Kyle Johnson Cherek. This is a show about culinary history, why we eat what we eat, the people, the places, the scenes and situations that set the course for the way we dine. Each show we pick a thing, a person, a drink, a movement, or an object that made its mark on what we call food. My guest on this episode is Jim Meehan. He received the James Beard Award 3 times, twice for his cocktail books, and his first as the winner in 2012 for the Outstanding Bar Program. Thank you for coming on Classic Eats, Jim.
Thanks for having me. It's good to see you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So the last time we talked on the phone, we were talking about the Speakeasy, which you are ineffably linked to through PDT, whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we were talking about our conversation just, for me, kind of like just naturally gravitated to how those types of places, your place, others, Angel Share, et cetera, even around the globe, I don't know how to put it into words, but they were different than any other hospitality experience.
Yep.
Things were more focused, and certain things were excluded.
Yes.
And when I go back into my memory about any times that I've had in what was called a speakeasy, everything is crystal clear and it's just that much more amplified.
Yeah.
Yeah. So why? I mean, you created one and really, reinvented a trend in one of the biggest cities in the world. So why do you think that's the case?
I mean, I think to start out, we only can pay attention to so many things. And I think what we pay attention to is what we value. Bars and hospitality venues are filled with stimuli. As an operator, it starts off with understanding that like there are all sorts of ways you can capture people's attention,
Mm-hmm.
and limiting them to focus on what you want them to pay attention to will be crucial to the experience they have at your venue. So I think for us, things that are obvious, like not having a television and a speakeasy is, you don't have to go to speakeasy college for that decision. But I think that the combination of limiting what people could pay attention to by virtue of the fact that like we had dark curtains blocking out all the natural light in the venue. It had a ceiling that you could easily touch with your hand. I mean, I'm sure it wasn't higher than 8 feet.
Yeah.
It was a sort of shotgun space that was probably no wider than I would say no wider than 15 feet at any
Like it was like a
point.
trailer in a way.
It really
Yeah.
was. It was like
Yeah.
a container, a container
Yeah.
ship with a brick wall on one side, with brick walls and sort of like the wood slat ceiling. So I
Mm-hmm.
think that the physical space itself fostered intimacy, and then the decision to how we laid it out, and not
Yeah.
limiting, not allowing standing, and basically like banquettes with really plush leather seats. I mean, there were all sorts of decisions that I don't think were necessarily made in an intellectual way, but that were
Mm.
made. Brian and Chris, who built the bar, went to Death and Company and they went to Milk and Honey. And I think that PDT is like the love child of those two bars. You have the Death and Company ceiling, you have the Milk and Honey banquettes. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that the bar that they built has almost like it was a new build bar, but it took cues from 19th century Brunswick bars, even though it was
If you would,
not much
yeah,
less ornate.
I almost don't believe you that it was a new built bar. I mean, because I know you well enough, I believe you. But
Yeah.
having been there, it felt like it had things spilled on it from pre-World
It
War
had a
II.
giant bumper, around
Yeah.
it, and that's a design that's been around for a really long time. So I think that
Right.
those elements helped basically people focus, and then I
Mm-hmm.
think that once you have somebody's attention, what you do with it is really important. And I think at PDT, what was really different from what was going on in the very sort of niche and emerging cocktail world when PDT opened was I had this sort of genuine feeling that jazz, like there was a sort of reenactment going on that felt like a Boardwalk Empire wasn't a thing yet, but like a lot of the cocktail bars felt a little bit Boardwalk Empire-y, and
Totally agree. Yeah.
I wanted it to be more authentic to who we were then, and what we cared
Mm-hmm.
about. So we were the
Mm-hmm.
first bar that opened up playing like the Rolling Stones and Tribe Called Quest and just music that we listened to, and we stopped playing jazz as a white noise soundtrack. We
Yeah.
opened up and later changed to Boardwalk Empire outfits, but we opened up with t-shirts and butcher's aprons. And I think that the thing that tell people, so frequently is the cocktails at the time were still something that most people were really sort of nervous about. They thought bartenders were quite
Hmm.
full of themselves. So the juxtaposition or the yin yanging of hot dogs and tater tots and craft cocktails was like a
Right.
security blanket that was reinforced by the taxidermy that we put like all sorts of goofy stuff on. So I think people understood the cues that they took from us is okay, this is a serious cocktail bar. I have to have a reservation to get in. There's no standing. I can't curse. I can't hit on the person next to me. So there's all these things that, like, if I want to be here, I've got to do this.
They
But
were removed.
right, like, so
Yeah.
we had basically a code of conduct that we brought from Milk and Honey and adapted it as well for our own sort of like the energy we wanted to have. But it's like you could listen to the Rolling Stones and eat tater tots. So it
Yeah.
was one of these things like they take what they're doing really seriously, but they don't take themselves so seriously. And I think more importantly, I'm really comfortable here and I'm really enjoying myself. And
Right.
so maybe I'm going to try these crazy drinks.
If you're just joining us, I'm talking with Jim Meehan, bartender, author, multiple James Beard recipient, and the founder of the Speakeasy in New York, PDT. I mean, when I think about that time, so I'll use Angel Share and PDT just in the sense of a conversation because for me, they both had this space where you came in from Griff Dogs and then coming into PDT, you came through the, the phone booth and it was like a Frank Lloyd Wright home where the ceiling was lower.
Yeah.
And it immediately changed your physical understanding of what was available to you and how to behave and how to or interact with the space, not behave. And the only reason I bring up Angel Share is because, it's on the world's shortest street in Manhattan, Stuyvesant Street. On the second floor, you could miss it. It looked like a coat closet, etc. But when you went in, there was that sign. The first thing that I remember seeing is like, no this, no cell phones, no loud talk, blah, blah, blah. And then it was much like PDT. It was so small. I mean,
Yeah.
you had booths and then you had a bar.
Yep.
And there, sometimes a language barrier.
Always a language barrier. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But to your point, what it elicited from a guest was immediately was an experience that you either wanted to sign up for, I think, wholeheartedly, or it just didn't click. And that was
Correct.
okay. That was okay.
Yep.
Because, I don't know what PDT's capacity was, but like 38 or something.
43. And it usually
43.
wasn't that full.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I'd worked in really busy bars and I was coming actually also I worked at Pegu Club before PDT
Right.
and I never worked busy shifts there. But I worked at Gramercy Tavern before PDT and that was the busiest place I maybe ever worked.
I was
And
going to
I
say,
I
talk
was
about a
really
busy.
I was really sort of I obviously wanted PDT to be financially successful, which would require it to be busy, but I never wanted to be there were moments at Gramercy Tavern. We were always like too deep at the bar, and it was always, the
Mm-hmm.
pressure to put on a great experience there was really high. And I always thought it was inappropriate that like at one of New York's best restaurants, literally the number one Zagat related rated restaurant when I was there, that there'd be a guest having like I'd be explaining the 3 cheese plate or the 7 cheese plate. I just cut them and their Baume de Venise and their Sauterne pairing that I chose for them while someone was like kind of rudely trying to get my attention over their shoulder to get a martini order before their reservation in the tavern or in the dining room. And I didn't want, I always
Mm-hmm.
thought that bar experiences deserved the same sort of conventions that dining experiences deserve, where like you couldn't go stand in front of another diner's table to like wave at the waiter to get their
Right. I need
attention at
more
your
butter.
table.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I feel like the part of my a lot of my instincts at PDT was to bring the sort of sanctity of a dining room to a bar. And that was really, I think Sasha was doing that originally at Milk and Honey, but it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't related to dining. And for me, I wanted to do that at PDT in a way that was related to dining and sort of fine dining hospitality standards.
It's so wonderful to hear. I mean, you expressed that more beautifully than I ever could have imagined. But I completely share that sentiment because I lived the experience too in your bar and some others, and then lived, and I think we both did, how it shifted for me that time into, I mean, you won the James Beard, first one in cocktail program ever in history in the nation. And the cocktail became this preeminent thing that was like a standard bearer and aspirational and artistic and a statement and a myriad of other things. And in some places, like I'm thinking of an experience that I had at Little Branch, which I think is a lovely place, right?
Yeah.
But it was so about the cocktail and not about the experience, energy, service. And I'm not trying to disparage them at all.
Right.
But if I hadn't had a fantastic cocktail to enjoy, I probably wouldn't have enjoyed myself.
Yeah, I think that I think back to, like, for instance, opening Pegu Club, which was like a long, we opened in 2005, but we spent like a whole year together training and learning from
Hmm.
Audrey at trainings at Flatiron Lounge. And
So
I
that was
think
the
back,
bar, just for our listeners, sorry to interrupt you. That was the bar
yeah.
that you worked at and honed a craft a bit more, if that's fair, before opening up PDT.
Yeah, so I in 2003 I was running the bar program at a restaurant called Pace in Tribeca, where I had my chance to write my first cocktail list, and I was working on the floor as a sommelier. And it was 2003 was the when Google image search was created, and at the time in the press, Audrey Saunders was being written about by people like Pete Wells, who were writing that Dale DeGroff's protege was working on her own bar project. And I remember at
Okay,
the time, Rob Willie was editing the first edition of the Food and Wine Cocktail Book, which I would later go on and edit 7 of. And I was like, Rob, are you speaking to this woman, Audrey Saunders and Dale DeGroff and these people that, I'd been reading about when I was in Wisconsin? He's like, yes, I am. I was like, do you think you could send Audrey to Pache? And he's like, I'll ask her. And so one night she came, I was behind the bar with Gabe Stolman, who now is like one of the
sure.
biggest restaurateurs in New York City.
Little
And
little Wisco, yeah,
Little
yeah.
Wisco was me and Gabe behind the bar at Pache back in 2003. I
Wow.
fortunately had sent Gabe Stolman home that night because it was slow.
Oh
Because
no.
Gabe certainly would have stolen the show, and maybe you'd be talking to Gabe right now about
Maybe,
cocktails.
yeah,
And
maybe not so yeah, fortunately you had, yeah,
good for
right.
me. It was a slow night. Gabe went home. I had the bar to myself. Audrey came in, and I made her all my cocktails, and I sort of begged her for a job. And yeah, like I was obviously good enough to write a cocktail list at one of the best restaurants, in the city
Right.
at the time, but I didn't have Audrey was my Yoda. She was the one who sort
Hmm.
of like brought me in and gave me all the sort of like training I needed. And she also introduced to me to everyone in the world and really kind of put me on the map. So like none of it would have happened without that experience at Pegu. But I think that the group that Audrey chose and the way she ran her bar was so nerdy. And I think going back to what you're saying, no one wanted what we were doing. Bartenders
Right.
didn't want to do this. Restaurants didn't want to like invest in a cocktail program. We
Yeah.
had to redesign all of the bars we worked behind because they weren't set up to make drinks like this. It's funny. I talked to people about the early days of the so-called cocktail renaissance, and it was deeply unpopular. Chefs
Right.
resented us
Right.
because we were
Yep.
getting a lot of press for it. Like nobody wanted this, and,
Yeah.
and we were all like you early days. You also hear about like all the vodka, the war against vodka, and like the customers frequently didn't want it, the chefs didn't want it, the owners didn't want it,
Hmm.
the bartenders didn't like who were making lots of money making terrible drinks didn't want it. So the early days were
And I
really
watched that, sorry to interrupt you, but I
no
watched that
go.
firsthand across the rest of the country as what you and Audrey and others established in New York. And then I watched, Bitter Cube guys or other proteges try and introduce it across the rest of the country. Midwest being I mean, as you know, if you can sell cherry Coke here, right? That was their test market. You could sell it to
Yeah,
everybody.
yeah.
And I watched customers say, no, I don't need a treatise. I just want to get drunk. Like I just want 2 fingers, some ice, call it a day, man. Yeah.
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 Yeah,
So go
I
on.
having learned having become an adult in Wisconsin, it's funny, and growing up in the Midwest, I've realized as I'm long gone, the Midwest is the most socially conservative place in America. And when I say that, what I mean is not politically conservative necessarily, but like there's a people love their traditions and their values, and
Yeah.
they've seen so many of the trends come and go on the coast, and they're not frankly like they love, like, they love their Friday fish fry, or they love
Right.
going to,
Right.
up north for the summer, to go camping, or they love going to Door County for, like, they have traditions. They go hunting, they go to football games.
Mm-hmm.
It's,
Mm-hmm.
it's, and I sort of have realized that I'm actually pretty socially conservative, long after I've left as well. But with respect to what we were doing in New York, I think the reason why a lot of it, frankly, didn't translate was because the original people who kind of brought this thing about, like, did it because they really believed in it, and
Mm-hmm.
they were committed to its adoption in some ways. And I feel like the people who heard about it and were like, I want to do this, I don't think that they were necessarily
Right.
ready to convert the masses. They didn't have like a missionary burning desire within them to get people to care about this like the first of us did.
Right.
And for that reason, they unfortunately didn't do the work to make sure that people really enjoyed it. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's part of how it also became less popular.
Right, right. Yeah, well, and it was a watered down version of it. I mean, and how did you navigate those years then you became this, standard bearer and figurehead through media for what the Speakeasy was. And in New York, in particular, no good idea lasts long before 1,000 people are onto it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and you ended up opening up a PDT in Hong Kong, I believe, and
Yep.
other places like that. Yeah, so how did you, as a true believer, right? I guess as an OG, I'm trying to look for a more eloquent term.
I like OG better than legend. I frequently get called legend, and it stresses me out because legend is definitely a past tense term, and
Uh,
I'm not
yeah,
dead, and I'm
yeah.
certainly not rich enough to be dead to stop working. So I'm
Well,
anything but legend.
you're not a legend to me because I've known you all these years, but but what you did was legendary. What you and others created was legendary because there's no question in how it was then culturally received and played forward. So
Yeah.
I guess that's how I would call it. But then how does one with the true spirit in their heart, how do you navigate those next 15, how have you navigated the next 10, 15, 20 years?
I mean, it I think that the first thing to understand is that, well, I mean, it's funny. People have always, during the course of this, they'd be like, what are you going to do next? Hilarious. It was just like, well, when you're not independently wealthy, like you don't decide what you're going to do next. Like you answer
Mm-hmm.
your phone and you answer your emails and you take the best next available option. So I think that
Yeah.
for me, what was truly extraordinary was that a lot of this was very serendipitous. Like, it wasn't
Mm.
necessarily while I said that, like, yes, it was, there was a missionary approach and commitment to what we were doing in the early days. But I think for all of us, there was also a belief that these drinks were just better.
That's our show. Shaken, stirred, muddled, on the rocks or up. Thanks for taking a seat at our bar for this episode of Classic Eats.
Classic Eats is created and hosted by Kyle Johnson Cherek and co-produced by Apwan Productions and WUWM.
Executive producers Kyle Johnson Cherek and Rob Schoonover. Audio editing and engineering by Brian Arkta and John Rymaszewski.
Once again, thank you to this episode's guest, Jim Meehan. You can hear this episode again and any others you've missed when you subscribe to Classic Eats, found wherever you listen to your podcasts.